Welcome to Biopics Mostly Suck, where we provide the true story behind movies based on a true story. Today, we're going to talk about the movie The Doors by Oliver Stone. How is it as a movie? Meaning as entertainment. How is it as fact? Meaning, is it accurate? We're going to rate the movie on both fronts. We'll give you a score at the end of the episode. In between, we're going to talk about it. Come join us. If you're ready, let's get started. If not, just hit pause. We'll still be here.
Well, so they say. It was legendary. Well, not even according to legend. According to multiple sources, biographers, band members, groupies.
Now, here's what I wonder: was he just waving it about, or was this like band members were in the hotel room getting changed, and it's that type of thing?
So I think the best story that illustrates how the band members came to know Morrison's stuff so intimately was, so you know the story about the night that they first did the end with the section about the Oedipal section about mother I want to fuck you, and father I want to kill you, and you know that story?
Is this in the recording or live performance?
This is a live performance at the Whiskey.
Go ahead.
Okay. So they had been paid to play for a 4-man band, and Morrison did not show up for the first 3 sets of the night. And the owner said, "I'm not paying you because I paid for 4 guys. I didn't pay for 3 guys. I paid for 4. And so the Doors take a break. They get in whoever's car, and they drive to Jim's hotel because he used to live in a hotel. He down on La Valencia. He would move in with Pam and then back and forth, but he lived in that hotel quite often. So they go to his house. They knock on the door, and this is how Manzarek describes it. He says he hears tip, 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 tip. Knock, Jim. Jim, it's us. And then Manzarek says Morrison cracks open the door, and he's in underwear and boots. He invites the band into the hotel room, and he goes, "Hey, man, do you want some?" And he opens up a drawer that was full of vials of LSD that Manzarek describes as glowing. He describes and we know Manzarek's penchant for exaggeration, and but nevertheless, the band frequently saw him naked. Let's put it that way. And there are did we really want to delve here?
We may as well.
Okay. Well, there is also photographic evidence to suggest as much.
Really, there's photos out there?
Not actual. So there's outlines. So unless it's sock theory. Unless he's stuffing his pants with the sock.
Uh-huh. So are we back on Sticky Fingers that we started out,
man, we always end up on
Bohemian Rapsody episode?
Back to Sticky Fingers.
That kind of brings us full circle. All right, so you're a big fan of Morrison, right?
Yeah. Yes. With reservations.
Okay, and I want to talk to you about this a little bit before we get into talking about the plot of the movie.
Okay.
And about the film The Doors, and then of course about fact checking it.
Yeah.
But you have digested a lot of information about Jim Morrison and The Doors, correct?
Yes. Oh, where would you like me to start? James Douglas Morrison. Name, occupation, Jim. Sorry.
But all 3 band members have written books.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if Krieger has written a book. John Densmore has written a book called Riders on the Storm, which is My Life with the Doors. Ray Manzarek wrote Light My Fire. And then Danny Sugarman who was a part of the Doors management, wrote No One Here Gets Out Alive, which is the quote-unquote official biography of the Doors, which is contested by Manzarek and the others. So everyone has their own version of Morrison.
Did Keneally write a book too?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't read. I've read interviews with her, but I've never read her book. If she has one, that would be really interesting.
We'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Maybe fact check ourselves at the end of the episode.
Absolutely.
how did you become a fan of Morrison, and what is the appeal? And I ask this through a jaded lens.
Yeah,
And the reason why is because when I look at Morrison, outside of how he was depicted in The Doors.
The film, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the film The Doors. I think, I think it would be very tiring to have been around him.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't know if I would have kept him as a close friend.
Would you have kept him as a band member, though? Because this is the interesting thing about the biographies.
Depends on if he was worth the trouble. I mean, because that's what it comes down to, right? Because there's a certain point, you get into it for the music, man, right?
Right. It's all about the music.
And then you become a business. And then you become a property.
And then you become a family.
You become an asset that needs to be protected, right?
Exactly.
So at what point in that churn of events that happen over the course of the life of a band does Morrison make himself irrelevant through his behavior?
So,
and that's why I wonder what the appeal is, because the movie did exaggerate his behavior.
Yeah,
but he did have that behavior.
Yeah, and the consensus on the movie is that Oliver Stone took one dimension of Jim Morrison and magnified it into the mythical, stereotypical poet, writer, singer as alcoholic, womanizing, like every cliche in the book. Yeah. And he had that side. But it's interesting, if you talk to Patricia Keneally, she'll say Morrison was a Southern gentleman. He opened doors for her. He was kind. He was soft-spoken. And then you talk to Pamela, like not that I've talked to these people, but you read their interviews, and he was just psychotic. So you don't get this comes through really strongly in Densmore's book. When John Densmore, drummer of The Doors, is talking about this exact problem. How much do we put up with before we say, let's get another lead singer? How much do we put up with before we say, like, it's just not worth it anymore?
And where did Densmore land on that?
Miami was a big turning point for Densmore. And then when Jim announced he was going to Paris, Densmore was actually pissed because he thought, well, we have another record to make. So the breaking point never came for him. He never said, I'm going to leave the band because of Jim Morrison. Wow. But the constant worry was, who is Jim's babysitter? But that's Densmore's perspective. If you read Manzarek's book, Jim doesn't have a babysitter. Jim is a free spirit flying through the cosmos, sprinkling wisdom among, bringing wisdom from the gods down to earth. So again, you get so many different perspectives on this one individual.
Wow, interesting.
And it's weird because the Patricia Keneally thing is especially interesting because she says, I hate that movie. For obvious reasons. They made her, into a farce. But she says, that's not the Jim Morrison I knew.
Interesting.
So I don't know.
So for you, what is the appeal of Morrison then? I mean...
the man, the musician, the poet, which part?
Well, and I guess that's my question is, do you look at a certain perspective of Morrison?
Yeah.
Do you dismiss other areas of Morrison?
Yeah.
So which areas of him appeal to you and which areas do you dismiss? Okay,
so musically, I don't think that Morrison was very musically inclined. And that's not a dig. That's just and he said it too. They tried to teach him to play guitar and he's like, nah, it'll take too long. So, and I don't think that he's technically, the greatest singer in the world. So I dismiss that. I dismiss all of his behavior because to me, I don't connect art with with a person's personal morality. So he could do whatever he wants and I can still enjoy his music, The thing that I like about Morrison, the appeal of Morrison, is the transcendence. His ability to hypnotize, in essence, a room full, a concert hall, a stadium, whatever it might be, to the point that is almost religious. And you read that in the Doors, in the write-ups of the concerts, and even from the band members themselves. They say, when we were on, it was spiritual. It was a spiritual experience.
Now, is that because of the LSD or apart from the LSD?
It's interesting because they stopped the LSD after, I want to say 68. Morrison was tripping like crazy, but then he just became a drinker and he stopped LSD.
Huh.
And so they went into that blues phase where they started doing all the old blues songs, the late 69 and 70. So it's complicated, and I think he gets pegged too easily as a stereotype. But what I love about Morrison and what draws me to him is the power of the language, but also the way that it is transmitted, the way that it is presented is so... It just sucks me in. It just sucks me into sometimes it's a dark hole, and sometimes it's a breaking on through to the other side. God forbid, right? But nevertheless, yeah, that's the appeal. It's the power that the man had.
The power in his presentation, the power in his words.
In his presence, in his words, in his ability to manipulate and control an entire crowd full of people through his words, gestures, and music, which is... It's problematic too because he was trying to start riots. He was testing as he says, testing the bounds of reality.
Interesting.
So it's a really interesting space for me because I don't know, when I go to a concert, I'm not expecting for there to be a riot.
Mm-hmm.
However, I like the idea of going to a Doors concert if I could go back in time and not knowing what is going to happen. Are they going to suck? Is Morrison going to show up? If they are on, how great is it going to be? Are people going to take their clothes off? Are people going to fight? I mean, it's that element of unscripted. This is real.
Mm-hmm.
That's the draw for me. There's a genuine authenticity to him, or in the persona.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you touched on some things that we're going to get to a little later on.
Okay.
Which I want to come back to. But let's go ahead and talk about the movie first.
Yeah.
And we'll first talk about the plot of the movie so people can become familiar with it again if they saw it many years ago, because this movie came out in 1991.
And, for a surprising number of people, this movie is their basis for their knowledge on the Doors.
Yeah.
This has defined the Doors for them, which that's problematic too.
That is very problematic because there's a lot in it that's wrong. But we're going to get to all of that.
Yep.
I promise. So let's talk about the plot of the movie. The Doors by Oliver Stone stars Val Kilmer. And I remember when this movie was being cast. Sorry, he just did his little Iceman bite from Top Gun, and it threw me. Because I remember when this movie was being cast, Val Kilmer was all the news because of how much he looked like Jim Morrison. Meg Ryan, Miss Pamela Corson, little miscast, I think.
Oh, yes, very miscast.
Playing Morrison's companion, girlfriend, and partner. The rest of the Doors are played by Kyle MacLachlan, who was also in Twin Peaks and is a great actor.
Yep.
He played Ray Manzarek. Frank Whaley was Robbie Krieger, and Kevin Dillard was John Densmore.
Yeah.
Kathleen Quinlan portrays Patricia Keneally, fling love of Morrison's, his wife. Technically his wife.
Technically his wife, yes.
Which is interesting. You know, Pamela Corson's grave plaque has Morrison on it.
Oh, Pamela. She hyphenated her last name, huh?
No, there's no hyphen. It's Corson Morrison.
Oh, it's okay.
No hyphen.
Wow.
Even though she was never legally married to Jim Morrison.
Wow.
Yeah. I guess everyone wanted Morrison's last name or something.
Apparently. She talks about that, though. She says what they had was real. Anyway, yeah.
So, I believe it.
Yeah.
The film opens with Morrison recording his album of poetry, An American Prayer, and it goes into flashback of Morrison as a young boy when he sees a dying Native American in a car crash in the desert. We move on to Morrison, now an adult in Venice Beach, studying film at UCLA, with director Oliver Stone playing the film teacher. And we need to stop for a moment here and talk about what is that thing on Oliver Stone's face, number one. Because in this, I didn't realize wigs and fake facial hair were so bad in 1991. Because
that's funny. I've never noticed that.
Because it is pretty bad.
Yeah.
he plays the film school teacher at UCLA.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of that entire exchange has to be when Oliver Stone tells Val Kilmer as Jim Morrison that his student film is pretentious. Pretentious, yes.
Pretty pretentious, Jim.
Now, mind you, if you've watched the movie The Doors, this is taking place in the context of a film that is pretty pretentious.
About as pretentious as you can
About
get.
as pretentious as you can get.
When you got Oliver Stone going, he was Alexander the Great. He was Achilles. It's Jim Morrison. It's pretty pretentious.
Yes. Just a little pretentious. And he meets Ray Manzarek, he meets Pamela Corson, as well as meeting Robbie Krieger and John Densmore, who found the Doors. Morrison convinces his new bandmates to go to the desert and take psychedelic drugs. They begin performing at the Whiskey A Go-Go on the Sunset Strip and meet resistance with the club owners. Apparently something about a singer who sings about fucking his mother.
What'd he say? Fuck the mother?
Does not sit well with them. And as the Doors become more popular, Morrison falls deeper and deeper into alcohol and drug abuse. He meets rock journalist Patricia Keneally, a journalist who is involved with witchcraft, and he participates in a Wiccan hand-fasting ceremony of marriage led by an older spirit who is played by Patricia Keneally. As Morrison's drug and alcohol use causes him to miss recording sessions, the other members of the Doors become more and more weary of his actions. While performing in Miami, Florida, Morrison exposes himself on stage, which results in criminal charges against Morrison, canceled gigs for the band, and personal relationships that go south as a result of Morrison's actions, not to mention the death of a Thanksgiving turkey.
Oh, yes. Jim Morrison, you have ruined another Thanksgiving.
Which I want to know, what did he do at the previous Thanksgivings?
Yeah, I mean, that was... my favorite is when Babe picks it up and goes, fuck it, let's eat this thing.
Which... I love that character actor, that big guy with the beard there. Yeah. I love him. He was also in... another movie based on a true story, Mask.
Oh, I never saw that.
You never saw Mask?
No.
With Cher
no.
and Eric Stoltz. It's about a kid named Rocky Dennis, and he had a condition where his bones in his face were elongated, and it was about his life, his relationship with his mother, that type, and teenage stuff. But it turns out that where my grandparents lived, up in the LA area in Covina, I think they lived the next city over, and my grandmother would see him all the time. So he was he was out and about doing his thing all the time. But Mask is a good movie, and that character actor plays a role in that too.
So that character actor is he's playing Babe Rollins, who is one of Jim's later drinking buddies who he acquired.
Oh, okay.
That caused division with the band too.
Really? Why?
Oh, because Jim acquired a new set of friends who didn't. The Doors themselves. Manzarek, Krieger, and Densmore, they definitely experimented, but they were not addicts and they were not heavy users in the way that Jim was, or Morrison was. So Morrison got drinking buddies, and he would bring them everywhere. Brought him to Densmore's wedding.
Really? So they were kind of like his drinking entourage?
The Memphis Mafia, whatever, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So the Thanksgiving turkey dies. Morrison... ruins yet another Thanksgiving. And in 1970, Morrison is found guilty of indecent exposure in Florida and is ordered to spend time in prison. While free on bail, Keneally tells him she's pregnant with his child, and Morrison then leaves for Paris, France with Pamela Corson. Morrison is found dead in a bathtub by Corson and is buried in, and pardon my French, you could probably pronounce the cemetery better than I can.
Père Lachaise. Père Lachaise Cemetery.
Père Lachaise. And the movie tells us that Morrison died of heart failure and Corson died 3 years later.
Yeah.
So, the movie The Doors, what are your thoughts on the film? We talked about Morrison, the real life person, a little ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
But as far as the movie, one thing I was thinking about today, well, let's find out what you think.
Okay. My thoughts on the film are that it is an incredibly exciting film to watch. and it really makes you feel like you're there. However, I think anyone with even cursory knowledge of the band and the history of the band would have a real problem with Oliver Stone turning his own fantasies into, and essentially writing his life into a story that Val Kilmer's going to play and Jim Morrison is going to represent. It doesn't feel like it matches. It also doesn't feel like it matches the performances that I've seen of the Doors. Mm-hmm. It seems over the top.
And I think you and I are on the same wavelength, because one thing I was thinking today is, do we find out more about Jim Morrison in the Doors, or do we find out more about Oliver Stone?
Oh, that's a great question. I think Oliver Stone.
I think so.
Yeah.
But you're right, even in the performances of the Doors, because they show the Doors at Ed Sullivan.
Yeah, and that's exaggerated.
Wholly exaggerated.
Wait. Couldn't get much high, not even close. He mumbles it on Ed Sullivan. Yeah.
And I read a couple accounts today. Depending on whose version you believe, they never agreed that they were going to change the line.
Yeah.
Is one. Or they just performed it as they always have, and Morrison claims he forgot.
Yeah.
Morrison, which is plausible.
It's plausible, but again, this is that part of the film, that dimension of the film that drives me crazy. I think there's enough in Morrison's life that you don't need to mythicize it. I think that there's enough there. That moment was unnecessary. Are you trying to make him more of a badass? I mean, the guy already he's a rock star living on the corner of La Cienega Boulevard. I mean, come on, you don't need to do that. You don't need to go that far.
Because the other interpretation is they were taking a standing up for the artist type of approach, which is the censors aren't going to tell us what to do.
Right.
And if you're Oliver Stone on that spectrum of choosing how to portray it, Oliver Stone being Oliver Stone is going to choose.
Of course, yeah. But also, though, sorry to interrupt, but that's not Morrison's song. Robbie Krieger wrote that song.
And they mentioned that in the movie.
They do mention that in the movie,
yes.
But it's interesting because those aren't Morrison's lyrics. Some of them are. He wrote the second half of the song, I think. But so we're mythicizing. Really, we should be giving the credit to Krieger there.
Correct. For the song.
For the song, right?
Absolutely.
Girl, we couldn't get much higher. It's so radical, and the conflation of that kind of stuff just drives me crazy with the movie.
Which I read an article. It turns out in 2017, the people who control the archives for the Ed Sullivan Show. Have you heard about this?
No.
They were able to find the line the censors wanted the Doors to use instead. Because I think in the movie, the guy says, can you say, girl, we couldn't get much better, yeah. Right? Which doesn't even rhyme. So it doesn't make sense. The line, and even the people at Ed Sullivan thought this was really funny. The line that the censors wanted the Doors to substitute girl you couldn't get much higher with is girl you wouldn't need to inquire.
About Morrison's Johnson? What are you inquiring about?
So what are the lyrics? Time to hesitate is through, no time to wallow in the
mire. Try now, we can only lose, and our love become a funeral pyre.
Baby, you can
light my fire. The time to hesitate is to... Wait, where are we in the song? Hold on, I'm lost in the song.
Girl, we couldn't get much higher.
Oh yeah. Oh, you know that it would be untrue. You know that I would be a liar if I was to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher.
Girl, you wouldn't need to inquire.
Girl, you wouldn't need to inquire. Oh yeah, that would really pack a wall up.
I mean, it would work.
All inquiries must be sent to Capitol Records at this. Yeah.
And I'm just hoping we didn't say too many lyrics of the song during this podcast
we can cut them.
To work. We can edit.
Yeah, we can edit.
No problem. Yeah. That's what editing's for. All right. Well, in this portion of the podcast, we're going to talk about the facts of the movie The Doors. And let's go ahead and start with early Jim and Venice. Because the movie starts by showing Jim as a little boy on the road in the desert as they pass a car wreck with a Native American family.
Yeah.
And what have you found?
regarding the Native American.
Yes.
So there were a group of Native American. It was a family, and Jim Morrison claimed, although I think almost every account I've read says that it was all tongue in cheek with him. He never took it seriously. He didn't think he was a shaman. But he would go around claiming that the dead soul, the spirit of the Native American, had flown into him as a child, and that he had developed these shamanic powers.
Okay.
And Oliver Stone really decided to play that up.
Uh-huh.
So that is what I have gathered. But also that when Jim would tell it, it was with a wink and a nudge.
Oh, okay. So he didn't take it seriously.
No.
Because he referenced it in lyrics.
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because apparently his mother and his sister think that he really exaggerated on that one. They never mentioned it being tongue in cheek, but
oh yeah. Well, a lot of a lot of the stuff you couldn't trust what he said. But he told everyone his parents were dead.
Yes, and they lived just over in Coronado.
Yeah,
because his dad was in the military.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, why did he tell everyone his parents were dead?
He hated his parents.
Why? What happened?
They just general discouragement from. They wanted him to be clean cut and follow the rules and be conventional. And when he would try to rebel, he had an overbearing father and a mother that they weren't very supportive of his dream. Which, if he had a dream at the time, it was unclear. It was to be a filmmaker. He wanted to go to film school or whatever. But the interesting thing with the parents is that he told everyone they were dead. I mean, even the band members, and they're going, "Hey, your parents are here, or your mom's here." I don't got a mom. I mean,
really,
yeah. And so the deep animosity. But that's always been a mystery for me, because I can understand just horrific abuse and who knows, maybe it did take place, but nothing screams out, I got to run away from these people and hate their guts and tell everyone they're dead.
Yeah, and from what I've read, his father never hit him.
No.
But took more of a military approach of dressing him down.
Yeah. And so there are the origins of the anti-conformist, and he doesn't want to be pigeonholed. He doesn't want to be put into any kind of, box or cliche or told what to do. And there comes the anti-authoritarian anti-authority streak in him, that rebellious, test the limits of reality, whatever that means.
Interesting.
He's a trip. You can't believe what he says. I think, because I see so much of it as performance. That's why. Even the interviews.
Well, and here's my thought on it, because you mentioned he was trying to start a riot.
Yeah,
and he could
many times.
And he could manipulate people.
Absolutely.
But he was an addict as well.
Yeah.
And that's a trait with addicts.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
So, interesting.
Yeah, it's really complicated. And especially the time, 68, that's a bad year. That is not a great year. And I remember Manzarek talks about it. He says, everyone in 67, everyone was flower power, and the Doors were the antidote to that. We were the darkness. We were the darkness of the 60s.
Which is interesting, because Manzarek is the one who tends to speak in more flowery language and have rainbows and unicorns, yep. And he doesn't seem to come from the dark at all. But that's where they all, even Densmore says it. Can't confirm with Krieger, because again, you don't hear much from Krieger. He's a funny guy. They all said that we were really interested in the darkness. We were interested in the darker pull. We weren't the Jefferson Airplane. We weren't the San Francisco sound. We were a raw, dark, visceral sound. Well, now that you say that, White Rabbit is not a happy song by Jefferson Airplane. No, but... And a lot of the Doors stuff, Love Street is not dark. Light My Fire. Hello, I Love You. The thing with... the end, most definitely.
Yeah, so here's the thing with Morrison, though, and this is why I say you can't believe him. Morrison took really seriously the French saying, the le petit mot, every orgasm is a little death. So, sorry, okay, yeah. For those of you at home, Google it. He used the symbolism of death and sex. He conflated those often. So death was sex to him, and sex was death, and it went both ways. So for him lyrically, and he's taking that tradition from the French poets.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the other thing you got to say about the guy is extremely well read. They all were. So where's he coming from? I don't know. Who's in his head? Is Rimbaud in his head? There's so much influence that you hear coming through Morrison.
Yes, and when you say Rimbaud, you don't mean Rambo. You mean
no, Rimbaud. Yeah, the poet.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay.
Not Sylvester Stallone.
I just.
Well, when Morrison and Rambo were in the jungles together.
I just wanted to clarify for people listening. All right. So, speaking of film, though, the movie shows Morrison showing his student film, which we talked about.
Yep.
Oliver Stone refers to it as
Absolutely.
pretentious. It shows a woman wearing a swastika armband on top of a television.
Yep.
And Morrison decides to quit film school.
I quit.
He quits, which didn't happen.
Nope.
Did not happen. Now the film's not available.
No, the film, and they only kept the winners of they would have their seminar, and at the end of the year there were 2 or whatever they would select as the top, and that film is lost to history. Densmore, however, is for me Morrison's biggest critic, the drummer. Densmore's the pure musician, not a drug addict. He took drugs and did all that, but not in the Morrison zone. Yeah. And Densmore is the harshest critic of Morrison in my view, but he says he saw the film and he said it was a joke. He said it was tame. He said that it was grossly exaggerated in the film.
And Manzarek said the only thing that the student film in the movie had to do with the real student film is the actress was German.
Yeah.
Plus, we should mention Morrison didn't leave film school.
Yeah.
He graduated with a Bachelor of the Arts.
He was a college graduate.
He was a college graduate, Bachelor of the Arts. And the name of that film that's lost to history is...
That's not Lost Highway. No, that's the other one he made.
A Feast of Friends.
A Feast of Friends, that's right.
Which should not be confused with the documentary about the Doors made by the Doors called A Feast of Friends. Nor should it be confused with the poem on Morrison's An American Prayer album called A Feast of Friends.
Nor should it be confused with the song
A Feast of Friends. So obviously you like the title.
Yeah, huh?
It's a good
title.
It's
a good title, Feast of Friends, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It could have a double meaning. It's like to serve man.
Yeah, it could have a triple meaning. It could be cannibalistic, too.
That's what I was saying.
Oh, to serve. Oh, I thought you meant to serve as in to serve. To respect and honor, honorably take care of your fellow humans.
So after Morrison cuts out of film school in the movie,
so to speak,
we're at Venice Beach, and that's where Manzarek and Morrison meet again. And I just have to share how Manzarek writes about this interaction in his book, Light My Fire, My Life with the Doors. And here's what Manzarek said. And I see this guy in semi-silhouette, wearing cutoffs, without a shirt, weighing about 135 pounds. I look again with more intensity, and who should emerge from the light from behind the sun into my field of vision, into my light of consciousness, but Jim Morrison. Oh, we're not done yet.
Oh, I know.
Hey, Jim. Hey, Morrison, I called out. The figure stopped, looked in the direction of the call, and waved back. Hey, Ray. And he comes walking over to me, across the 25 to 30 feet of sand where I'm sitting off the shore break, and there standing in front of me is the new blue god, my buddy Jim, transformed. He looked great. He had lost all his baby plump, dropped 30 pounds, down from 165 to 135. His hair had grown out in soft ringlets, and he looked not unlike Michelangelo's David. Even more like busts I've seen of Alexander the Great. Maybe that's where Stone got that from.
Probably. There are a lot of lines that you can read through where Stone cherry picked from the biographies and threw in some direct quote. But so they're direct quotes of the band talking about the band 30 years later.
Oh, so he pulled from their books to create some of the dialogue.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Got it. And Manzarek continues in this fashion as he relays a banal conversation between him and Morrison, as he compares Morrison to Paul Newman in HUD, James Dean in Giant, and Steve McQueen in The Great Escape. So Manzarek was an interesting guy.
Very interesting. Very talented, too. Unbelievably talented.
What can you tell us about Manzarek and his background?
Jeez. Well, he's got a blues background. He's from Chicago, Polish. The thing about Manzarek that it has always been so impressive to me, and there's actually a really cool story about when they played in Amsterdam. They were always looking for a bass player, right? So he was a piano player. He plays jazz, blues. He can play anything, and they're always looking for a bass player. And they find this little Fender Rhodes bass, and it's for the left hand. So that was the answer to their bass player. Not let's find a bass player. Oh, I'll just play the bass in my left hand, and I'll play the organ, and I'll play all the organ riffs in my right hand. And so bass and the lead organ, those are two different time signatures, two different melodies, two different rhythms going on. So he's doing a bass riff over here, and he's playing a lead on the top of it with his right hand, right? In Amsterdam, I think this was 1968, someone gave Jim like a big chunk of hash, and he just put the whole thing in his mouth, and of course passed out, and was unable to do the show. And the Dutch fans did not accept this news.
That sounds like Dutch fans.
Okay.
Yes.
And they demanded the Doors. So Manzarek sang.
Really?
Played the bass with his left hand, the organ with his right hand, and sang all the Doors material for that concert. Unbelievably talented.
Now you play keyboards, piano.
Yeah.
How difficult is that? You said they have different time signatures, but to someone like me who doesn't have that understanding, how difficult is it to do that and sing on top of it?
It's not virtually impossible. It's this thing. Try to do two different motions with your hands, right? And then now try to add a third.
Would
up and down, and then this is awful for radio, but okay. So you're doing a circle with your right hand and up and down with your left. That's really hard to do, right?
Yeah.
Now add in a third thing that you have to do that is out of sync with those other two things that are already out of sync with each other.
Would it be akin to what a drummer has to do, or more difficult?
More difficult.
More difficult.
Drummers keeping time.
Interesting.
And filling.
Interesting.
So Manzarek is not only Densmore's driving the band. Manzarek's driving with the bass. He's also playing the lead. And then this is the impressive thing to me. He never sang those songs. Jim always sang them.
Yeah.
And he goes up and does a 2-hour concert in Holland. Pretty cool. Yeah.
Wow.
Fascinating individual. Really involved with and has been the counterculture movement, the peace, love, and I mean he's really carried that torch. But yeah, I would say for me, Manzarek is just musicianship. That's what I get from Manzarek. It's unbelievable. If you watch him play, he'll play Coltrane on the piano. It's it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I got to see him in the late 80s. In fact, I saw him when this movie was being filmed. Because it was right about the time when they were putting out casting calls for extras for the Sunset Strip. And I was working at Tower Records at the time. So I was in that pipeline to hear about that type of stuff as well. But my now wife, we were dating at the time, we went to a show over at Cal Poly Pomona where he played piano behind Michael McClure, who's a beat poet.
Yeah.
Tickets were $2.
Unbelievable.
At the Student Center at Cal Poly Pomona. And it was amazing. He, of course, was talking about Morrison because that was in the air in Los Angeles at that time.
Okay.
It's like you were constantly getting updates about the movie being filmed, you know, Kilmer as Jim Morrison or Billy Idol breaking his leg in a motorcycle accident, and because he has a role in the film which had to be cut down. But there was always news about the film as the film was being made.
Okay.
So it was in the air.
Yeah.
And Manzarek would be talking about different aspects of Morrison.
And was it much of, did it smack of the Light My Fire bio?
Yeah, it smacked like Blue God stuff.
Smacked like Blue God.
like Blue God stuff. Most definitely. And then he was always giving the allusions to, well, Jim's dead, or is he?
Oh, yeah. That
type of thing.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
he was really into that. But there's one thing he did that really stuck with me, because he said, don't ever do this to a piano. And I've always wanted to ask you this.
Yeah.
He had a grand piano, lid was open, and he leaned into it and he played the strings with a steel pick.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
While Michael McClure read poetry.
That's so cool.
Is that bad for a piano?
It's really bad, but it's cool. It's a cool sound.
It's a really cool sound.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do it with brushes too. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's horrible for your strings. Because piano strings last, 40 years. They last a long time.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You don't have to change. It's once in a lifetime you change your piano strings.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, one of the cool things that happened during this concert, actually after the concert, is we had bought Michael McClure's book of poetry.
Yeah.
And we got his signature in it. And then we were waiting for Ray Manzarek. We're waiting by the room they had for him at the Student Center. And we said, oh, would you mind signing this? And he said, let me go inside and rest a little bit. Then I'll come out and I'll sign whatever you have. And he goes inside. He closes the door. And then he opens the door like 2 seconds later. And I think there were probably 10 of us who were standing out there. And he just said, you know what? They left me a lot of food in here. Why don't you guys just come in? I'm going to rest. You guys can ask me any questions you have about the Doors. And we did. We hung out in Ray Manzarek's dressing room, and we just
That's wild.
chatted and talked. And yeah, we ate his food.
Yeah.
Most definitely. He had a cheese plate. And
Nice guy?
nice guy. I mean, he invited 10 strangers into his room.
Yeah.
Just to hang out and chat right after a performance. So, I think it goes without saying. Nice
Yeah.
guy. Very
Cool.
nice guy.
Yeah. He's always, in the interviews, he's always the most effusive, definitely. But this is what Patricia Keneally said in real life. And I'm thinking of this in trying to link this with the Blue God thing. Patricia Keneally said Jim Morrison's role was to present the gods to humans. The face of the god. He was an intermediary between the gods, and not God with a capital G, the pagan gods, right? The Dionysus and all that kind of stuff. He was an intermediary between, and she thought that was his role, was to present divinity to humanity and to show humanity what it was like on stage for 2.5 hours. They got to experience it. So Manzarek is not alone, is my point, in his fascination with the mysticism surrounding Morrison.
So are you saying Patricia Keneally thought Jim Morrison was the rock and roll pope?
He functioned as it.
In the same capacity?
In the same capacity. Not that he believed it.
Ah.
It was this is Keneally, though. This is what Patricia, she says it was an act that was for show. The shaman stuff,
Mm-hmm.
the invoking the spirit, that Jim didn't believe any of that. He didn't believe they were Native Americans. What's the Robbie Krieger quote? I don't think Jim thought there were Indians running around in his head. Well, no way. Yeah, and so that's why I think it's just so problematic, and especially when we get into the fact and the fiction, is people have some real far out theories on Morrison.
Yes.
Yeah. You know the one about well, we'll get
No,
to it.
no. Is it going to be later?
Yeah, it's going to be later.
Okay, then we'll get to it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Pam and Jim.
Pam and Jim.
Now, when did Pam come in with the Doors? Because in the movie,
68, I think, I want to say.
they have him following her and climbing up to her balcony
In Venice,
and kissing her before even meeting her. It's like,
Oh, no, but she was with another guy.
and she was with another guy. Yeah, so it's like, I mean, what girl couldn't like that?
Well, and also, again, let's just comment on Oliver Stone here. Why is that's fictitious? Why do you have the need to make Jim Morrison follow a girl home from the beach, climb up her tree, sneak into her bedroom, wake her up in the middle of the night?
No, it was when she had a party.
Oh, they were having
She was hosting a party when he first came up.
That's right. In the movie. Okay, the second part is when he sneaks in, and then they go out for
Which creeper? Hello.
He's like, hey, it's a beautiful night.
I mean, what woman wouldn't swoon over that?
Swoon.
Oh my goodness.
But again, an unnecessary. Morrison made enough legends for himself. You don't need to make myths out of myths, you know.
So how did Jim and Pam meet?
She came to a show at, I think when they were playing, it must have been 67 then, because they were playing the Whiskey. She came to a show, and pretty soon after that, they were...
London Fog.
Oh, the London Fog, I'm sorry.
Fog.
London Fog. She came to a show, and then after that, they were on again and off again until Paris, until they moved there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Jim referred to her as his cosmic mate.
Yep.
And common law wife.
Yep.
And they were together for quite a while. And after Jim died, she never recovered from his death.
No.
And she wound up prostituting herself to feed her smack habit.
Yep.
And died from a heroin overdose just a few years later.
It's really sad. Yeah, and that's the end of the movie. But the heroin rumors and all of the various mysteries surrounding Morrison's death. But it is confirmed by the bios that Pamela had gotten into heroin and Jim didn't like it. And he had a fear of needles, actually. He was afraid of needles.
He did, but he snorted heroin.
Yeah, I guess you could. Yeah, you could overdose that way.
Which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
So that's a shame. So what did Pam do specifically? I mean, I know Jim had bought her a clothing storefront.
Boutique, yeah.
I think with a royalty check from Strange Days.
Oh, was that what it was from?
That's what it was from.
Oh, okay.
And then she ran that for a little bit, but did she do anything else specifically?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that they had this constant. I don't know what else she did in terms of a living, but I know there was this constant. They both had Pam and Jim both had repeated lovers that they would separate. They would separate from each other and kind of flee to their respective people they were having affairs with. And there was this. What is he, a count? She got him. I'm trying to remember. This is toward the end of the movie, but some count who ended up turning her on to heroin and never.
Actually, I have that for later on.
Okay.
That's we'll get
there. Yeah,
we'll get deep into that.
Deep into the count.
We're going to get deep into Morrison's death. In fact.
Oh, really?
Because I don't know how much of it you know.
I don't think I know very much.
Ooh.
No.
Ooh.
I only know about 3 or 4 really good stories, but not nothing current.
Oh, well then let's go ahead and get through the rest of this because
this will be awesome.
We know the majority of what comes next in the Doors movie is just false and exaggerated.
Yeah, and gratuitous.
So speaking of Patricia Keneally and how she's portrayed in the movie, because in real life she was a rock journalist.
Absolutely.
And in the movie, she brings him into the world of witchcraft and mysticism. They drink each other's blood, take part in a hand-fasting ceremony, become married in the Wiccan faith, and she becomes pregnant with Morrison's child, and she makes the decision to have an abortion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is this just going to be an Oliver Stone firing squad today.
Well, let's start out by saying I don't know if you've seen the behind the scenes documentary.
Yeah, I have.
Okay. I thought first off, if for the DVD of the movie The Doors, that behind the scenes feature, which is about 40 minutes long, I'm surprising how candid and critical and even self-critical it is of the process of making the movie.
Interesting, yeah.
Because Stone talks about Keneally in particular, and this is an example of how you have a character who is a composite character.
Yeah.
Which in the Doors movie, the character of Patricia Keneally is a composite of multiple women that Morrison knew throughout his life.
Yeah.
And not a representation of Patricia Keneally as she really was as a person. And on this behind the scenes feature, Stone even says if there's one thing he would go back and change, it would be to give her a fictional name.
Yeah.
Rather than using Patricia Keneally's name.
I still don't, sorry to cut you off. I don't like the way he did. I don't like his apology though.
Why?
Because it's couched in I suppose, and I was thinking, this is how I remember that, the Oliver Stone explaining it. Well, yeah, thinking back on it now, I suppose if I had to do it again, I would have made, and it's just all these pauses, the Patricia Keneally character, a separate character, and I don't know. I didn't buy it.
Well, even so, he didn't have to say anything at all on it.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
He could have just said, I'm not making a documentary, which is the common line we hear used with biopics.
Exactly.
Where they say, look, it's art, it's entertainment, or it's my vision, or anything they use to make an excuse of taking liberties, some of which need to be taken justly. Others, such as what happened with Patricia Keneally, are really wrong to do to a person, especially when they're still walking this earth.
And they still have to go around living and breathing. Yep.
And that feature also includes Keneally and her reaction to it.
Yep.
And how unhappy she is with Oliver Stone and how much it hurt her being in a movie theater with people. And having that scene played where Morrison's kind of sloughing her off and the laughs that were coming from the theater crowd. Yeah. So I couldn't imagine being an advisor on a film, which she had the role of doing. Yeah. Right? And then having that type of treatment from the people who are making the film.
Yeah. Well, I think what she said was Oliver Stone had the makings of tragedy, and he turned it into farce. Mm-hmm. And she said it was meaningful, and he just turned it into like you said, her listening to the laughter in the theater. Yeah. Morrison says, I was stoned. I didn't. I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really hard one to watch and to think about, because it's now Patricia Keneally has been pre-stereotyped, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're that witch chick that Jim Morrison knocked up, right? I mean, it's like that's kind of how she get the treatment.
You introduce them to drinking each other's blood,
right? Yeah.
Which she never did. Yeah. That wasn't something she did. So, by the way, the documentary is called "The Road to Excess."
The Road to Excess, yes, which is from William Blake. The Road to Excess leads to the Palace of Wisdom.
And if you do watch the movie The Doors, if you have an interest after listening to this podcast, then I highly recommend watching that feature as well. I think you can find it online.
Yeah, definitely.
Well worth watching. So, Morrison in Miami. We started off the podcast talking about
Junk and Schlongs.
Junk and Schlongs, which we did at the beginning of Bohemian Rhapsody as well.
Yes, sir.
But Miami, this was 1970, right? Or was it 69?
69. Let me ask you.
Okay.
How do you think the movie did?
In representing Miami?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I wasn't there. I was
just based on the factual accounts.
Factual accounts seem to vary. Densmore says he didn't see Morrison do it, but I really question the point of view of the guy behind the drum kit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So whether Morrison did or not, what's important is the authorities in Florida thought he did. And even more importantly, a jury thought he did. And for people who don't think that as long as they don't do anything wrong, they can't get into trouble. You just need the right number of people to think you did something.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, all of the eyewitness accounts are problematic. They're relatives. The police accounts, because again, he wasn't arrested immediately. Everyone was cool for a little while.
Oh, because in the movie they arrested him.
Right, they drag him off stage. No, so he wasn't arrested immediately. And that's why they said they were so surprised by it. The Doors, they said, like, Jim's done this a million times. He's tried to start a riot a million times. Why now? And everything was cool, and then all of a sudden they get word that that charges are being pressed and that he's, going to go on trial. So it was a surprise to them that it had worked out, but they all insist he didn't do it. And Ray Manzarek's line on it.
No.
So here we go with more great Ray Manzarek. So for anyone listening, just watch Ray Manzarek on Jim Morrison's death, and there's a YouTube video. But he addresses Miami in it, and he says, "What happened in Miami was that Jim Morrison was out there, and he said, 'You guys aren't here to see a rock concert, are you? You're here to see something more, right?' And the audience goes, 'Yeah.' And he says, 'What do you think? What is it that you came to see? You want to see it? You want me to show it to you?' And yeah. And then Manzarek says, 'And Morrison convinced the entire auditorium. It was a mass hallucination. He implanted the thought in their minds, and they actually saw his member, which he never took out.' That's Manzarek's explanation. It was a mass hallucination."
Okay. Well, whether it was or not, the state of Florida thought it was.
Yes.
And the state of Florida ever since then developed quite a good track record when it comes to different forms of popular music as well, with Two Live Crew in the 90s and other things.
Okay, I won't go.
Yeah, so we won't go down that road. But Morrison, who he was found guilty, right?
Mm-hmm. And he was sentenced, I think, to 6 to 8 months, something like that, of labor. And but it's funny, the guilty charges. Right, there were 4 counts, I think. Simulated, indecent exposure, public drunkenness, which he got off on.
Okay.
He didn't get the drunkenness charge. He got the indecent exposure, but then they also had him he used to get down on his knees and watch Robbie play slide guitar.
Uh-huh.
And the Doors, and this was another thing that I feel like the movie did not do that scene too well. All the Doors said that Jim used to do that all the time. He would get down and he was fascinated with the slide guitar, and he was fucked up, and so he was fascinated with the slide guitar, and he would just watch it on his knees. And so Florida says, well, that's imitation of fellatio on stage, and so
his head is at Krieger's pelvis level, moving back and forth.
That was actually a charge, but that one got dropped. Yeah. So it's really it's bizarre. The trial is bizarre too. Everyone has their version of what happened at that concert.
Mm-hmm. Wow. But he was found guilty, and he was out on bail.
Mm-hmm.
How was he able to leave the country for France then?
Hell if I know. I have no idea. I mean, was it a state thing?
I have no idea, but that's one question I've always had.
That's a really interesting one. How was he able to get out of the country?
Because if you're out on bail, usually they might take your passport.
Yeah.
I'll need to look into that because he ends up going to Paris. And this isn't something that gets talked about a lot when it comes to Morrison, but it looks like he was fleeing charges.
Yeah, and that's
moving there.
It's a really interesting thing that no one points out.
No.
If people go, oh, he went to, Manzarek says, oh, he's going to go be a poet, he's going to go be a writer. That's a really interesting point, though.
If you're found guilty and you're out on bail and your next step is to serve the sentence, you're skipping out.
Yeah.
Is what's happening.
Yeah. I know that they had told him that they could drag that appeal out for years. So I know that he wasn't frightened of facing jail time because his lawyers had told him, look, this will go on for 6 years at least. We'll keep you out of jail. but the accounts of him going to Paris and those all differ too. Densmore was really upset about it. Manzarek thought it was a great idea. Manzarek said, "Hey man, we'll be back here waiting for you. Go write, go be a poet, go do your thing." Manzarek was excited. I don't think Krieger had an opinion about it. But they were just waiting for him to come back to record their next album.
Wow. And he did go and write. He had his writing books with him.
Yeah.
And was doing that out there. I found a web page that had what were purported to be the last pictures of Morrison.
No way.
And I'll have to, this will be on the website. I'll have to show it to you. But he was, he wasn't looking quite fat.
Okay.
But really bloated.
Yeah.
Really, really puffy in the face.
Was he clean shaven yet?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Clean shaven, but he was looking really, really puffy. So he and Pamela are in Paris.
Yeah.
They're hanging out there. And
they make a new group of friends.
They make a new group of friends. And in the movie, Morrison is found dead in the bathtub, which is how many people picture it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what the common thought is Morrison's body at the age of 27 just gave out. He had done too much to it. Yeah. He's in the bath. And
with a smile on his face.
And he just dies.
Yeah. Turns
out there's a little more to it.
Oh, this is going to get interesting.
Oh, okay. And this is something you don't know.
No, I only know a few of the legends about they're good ones, but I don't know factual stuff about Morrison's death.
So let's talk about what was happening that night. So what happened that night is Morrison went out to score heroin for himself and Pamela Corson
at a club
at the Rock and Roll Circus.
Right, and there was that was a famous smack joint, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it turns out that what happens is Marianne Faithfull, the singer, was dating a guy there in Paris. And this is the Count who you were referring to.
Yeah.
The Count's name was Jean de Breteuil. And it turns out that he and another guy met Jim at the Rock and Roll Circus. Jim Morrison was at the bar, and Sam Burnett, who was a former Paris nightclub manager, he was 26 and working at the Rock and Roll Circus at the time. He had seen Jim come in frequently. He saw him there all the time. So when Jim was there with two guys and then suddenly Jim disappears from the bar, Sam Burnett became a little concerned. So he goes to the bathroom, and that's where security kicks down the stall. And by Sam Burnett's account, they find Jim Morrison, ashen gray, on the toilet with foam coming out of the corners of his mouth. Now, this is when you get into a piece of competing interests. Okay?
Okay.
Because Sam Burnett says he wanted to call for help right away, but the owner of the club didn't want to get involved in a scandal. The two drug dealers are there at the stall. They definitely don't want to be anywhere near this thing.
Yeah.
So they say, no, he's just unconscious. We're going to take him to his bathtub in order to revive him. So they carry him and put him into the bath. Whereas at the same time, you also have Pamela Corson, who when she was questioned by French authorities, she reported that she was Morrison's cousin. So because she's an addict, she doesn't want to get caught. So you have a bunch of people who don't want to be involved with Morrison's death, who don't want to get caught in some perspective of Morrison's death, and the official story becomes Morrison died in the bathtub.
Right.
There was no autopsy performed.
Nope.
Because Pamela Corson didn't allow one. So his official cause of death is listed as heart failure. Now, what I'm curious about is how did he become interred in Père Lachaise? Because
he wanted to be buried there.
Is that the proper pronunciation?
Père Lachaise.
Père Lachaise. I was close.
Yeah.
So, pardon my French. Because I thought It's a French cemetery of artists and poets.
Yep.
So was it common for them to allow foreigners to be buried there?
No. Well, no, for foreigners, yeah, but they were very hesitant about Morrison, and actually there have been a lot of problems over the years with his grave. They didn't want him there. It was a fight to get him in there. And then the bust that they originally put up, there was so much vandalism and it was just like desecration, basically, of a grave, that they had to remove the bust and replace it with the James Douglas Morrison, just the little stone. But Père Lachaise Cemetery is not a fan of Jim Morrison's presence there.
Because he was buried just a couple days after his death.
Yes.
So it wasn't a very long argument that took place.
Have you found anything else about the death? So Manzarek, when they got the call that Morrison had died, they said, okay, we're going to send Bill Siddons over, the manager. And Manzarek said to Siddons, look, man, I don't care what you do, just make sure you see the body. And he didn't. He didn't insist. It was a closed casket. Siddons walked into the room, and he of course, what are you going to do? Ask someone to pry open a casket? Give me a break. Manzarek is still on this trip that, Jim may be out there. There are also, about the rumor that he went to Ethiopia?
No.
Okay.
No, tell us about that.
So that comes from Rimbaud, the poet, was also who very much Jim Morrison modeled his life on, or at least was a kindred spirit of. Radical, did all kinds of crazy shit, but was also a poet. He just disappeared, and he went down to run guns in Ethiopia. Yeah, and and so people say that Morrison followed his idol and just disappeared into Africa. Anyway, that's one of the stories.
If what Sam Burnett says is the correct sequence of events, then he died in Elvis' death. He died on the toilet.
Oh, man, an Elvis death, yeah. Is that corroborated? That account?
Yes, it has been corroborated by medical personnel.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's what I was asking.
Lieutenant Morrison as well.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Because what was the great quote from Manzarek when he says they were doing something on the death of Jim Morrison? This was 15 years ago. He says, they're about to exhume Jim Morrison's body, or the casket, and when they do it, I will be there to make sure. He's still...
The more I hear about Manzarek, the more I love him.
I know. You just want to hang out with him all the time.
You crazy bastard. Just keep going.
Just keep doing it.
Just keep doing your thing, which unfortunately he's not, because he passed as well. But yes, God bless Ray Manzarek.
Absolutely.
My goodness. Now, due to the confusion surrounding Morrison's death, there was a news delay before the death was announced to American media. And Morrison's father had difficulty getting the facts surrounding his son's death. I know Morrison's parents visited the grave once.
I didn't know that.
But they've never commented on why they didn't have him move to the United States. There's never been a comment from them on that. But what we do know is the last known words that Morrison wrote in his notebook. Have you heard this?
No.
His last words written in his notebook were, last words, out.
That'll send a chill through you.
Yeah. In his will, he designated Curson as the beneficiary. After she died in 1974, her family and Morrison's family became co-owners of the estate. And that's where it sits now. And as we said earlier, she died a few years after Morrison. Yeah. So sad tale overall.
Oh, it's incredibly sad, and that's another problem I have with the movie. I feel like it glorifies. I feel like Oliver Stone has completely misinterpreted what the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom means.
And I would agree. And I'm not usually one to be a fan of because something is depicted, that's glorification.
Right.
Right? Because I think there's a lot of times things are just depicted because they were.
Yeah.
And people yell and scream, "Oh no, they're smoking a cigarette. You're glorifying." No, they're just smoking a cigarette. But I would say most definitely because when I saw this movie in 1991, I saw it at the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood. I didn't leave with this romantic ideal.
Oh, okay.
I left thinking, wow, that's fucked.
Interesting.
Because in the end, what we're really watching was with Jim and Pam.
Yeah.
Are a pair of addicts.
Yeah.
And addictive behavior.
Yeah.
When you're talking about him wanting to incite a riot, he could control a crowd.
Yeah.
Those are behaviors of addicts. And it ended for both of them. Like it does, unfortunately, for a lot of addicts.
Yeah.
So I didn't leave at all with that whole, oh, what a romantic notion.
Yeah.
In any way, I just left thinking, what a waste. I mean, I wonder what else he could have done. But as we were in the lobby leaving after the movie, there was a group of young people nearby who said, "Oh, we should all go to the desert and take peyote."
Okay,
and I'm like,
so
you guys just
missed the fucking
missed the point.
Yeah.
Unless they got the point Stone was making,
and that's,
right?
That's the thing is that it's, Bernie Taupin, Elton John's lyricist, has a great line about Morrison. He said, "Listen, there's nothing heroic, romantic, or remotely pleasant about being a fall down drunk."
Yeah.
And he said, any attempt to glamorize that in any form is essentially bullshit. Because he went through it too. But he references Jim Morrison, and he says, I hate the way that the press deifies these people.
Yes.
Who destroy themselves, because it's destroying yourself is not fun. It's not a romantic process. It's an awful process, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
I mean, I've had my rare instances where I'm around other people, and excess has taken place. I don't think anyone would call my actions romantic in any way.
No, and neither the people. It's not romantic, and that's also the thing. It wasn't just the drugs and the alcohol; it was the behavior I felt was romanticized.
Yes,
that's sociopathic behavior.
Yes,
in many ways. If it's for a good cause, I could maybe see some rationalization behind it, right? Like, your ends justify the means or whatever. But I just felt that Oliver Stone wants to be Jim Morrison, wanted to be Jim Morrison. And that bullshit at the end when he's saying how he misses Jim Morrison and he has a tear come to his...
Yeah.
What, were you friends with him? Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, is he romanticized because he died young?
Well, there's a lot of there's the 27 Club thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's that. There's also the myth of the alcoholic, drug addict musician. Mm-hmm. There's the myth of the alcoholic writer, the alcoholic poet. I mean, we can just go down the list of names of people who are in this canonized, mythologized category.
Well, Kurt Cobain,
Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. I mean, you can go. John Keats. I mean, you can go really far back, and this thing, it's not a current phenomenon. It's I think it's a universal phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Is that we deify these people, their behavior. It's bizarre.
Yeah, who are insanely talented in many respects.
Exactly.
Right.
But along with the talent comes often that spiraling sense of self-destruction.
But do you think some of the deification, some of the romanticism comes from dying young? Because because if Morrison died in Elvis' death, what's really the difference other than age?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how is Elvis regarded? Thin Elvis, fat Elvis.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And him dying on the toilet is looked at as sad.
Yeah. And so that's that myth, and Oliver Stone actually talks about it in that behind the scenes when he starts talking about it. It's Alexander the Great, it's Achilles, it's Jim Morrison, and he says to go out in your prime. That's because people don't see the wane or the decline, that you go out on top.
Exactly.
And so you're frozen in that moment, and you're deified forever.
And right? I think that's what that school of thought means, is that the best thing Morrison could have done is die, is it freezes the doors in time.
It freezes them. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny when I was younger, I loved the movie for the movie. I watched it a lot of times. I watched it many times, and then I just could. I don't know. The thing that changed is I saw a couple of DVDs of a Doors live show, and I went, "What? That's not the dude from. That's not even the performer I saw in the movie."
Yeah.
And so I couldn't. I can no longer connect to Val Kilmer playing Jim Morrison to any reality.
Got it.
If there is one pertaining to Jim Morrison, you know.
He looked a lot like him.
Oh, and he sang all the songs.
Yes.
And he used to have a Doors cover band.
I did not know that.
And yep. And that's how he actually got Oliver Stone to let him sing the songs. He said, "Okay, here. We're going to take a drive around, Mulholland or whatever, and I'm going to play you 4 songs. 2 of them are Morrison, 2 of them are me. You have to tell me which ones are which." And they were all Val Kilmer.
Oh, nice.
And Stone couldn't guess. And he went, "Oh, those 2. No, those 2. No, those 2. No, those 2." And he said, "No, it's all me."
Nice.
Interesting, yeah.
So let's rate this film. So as a movie, The Doors, 1 to 5 stars, we give it
4.
a 4?
As a movie?
As a movie.
As a movie.
Piece of entertainment, yes, as a movie.
Totally divorced.
4 out of 5.
I'll give it a 4.5.
4.5.
Yeah.
So you raised it.
Entertainment value?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'll go 3.
Okay.
I'll go 3 on that. So 3, 4.5.
Yeah.
We'll average it out there. And the other criteria is how well does it present the facts? Grade scale of A through F.
Hovering around a D plus, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll go D.
D, like not average. You're not hitting the normal points that would qualify for a C. I think. Yeah, it's a little below passing.
Yeah, I think so. We'll go with a D.
Yeah. So back to the big D.
Back to the big D. All right, John, thank you much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Now is the time when we fact check ourselves. We come to these discussions prepared, but sometimes the discussion takes us into areas we weren't prepared to answer. For instance, we wondered why Morrison was allowed to travel to Paris after being convicted on 2 misdemeanor counts of profanity and indecent exposure in Miami, Florida. I have not been able to find a solid answer in my research, except that he was allowed to remain free while he appealed his sentence. If anyone has more information, please contact us at biopicsmostlysuck.com and share your wisdom with us. We also talked about Patricia Kenneally Morrison and wondered if she also wrote a book about the Doors and Jim Morrison, just as Ray Manzarek, John Densmore, and Ray Sugarman had done. In fact, she did write a book that was released in 1992, the year after the movie The Doors was released. It is titled Strange Days, My Life with and Without Jim Morrison. Kenneally Morrison is also a prolific author in the fantasy genre, and she releases her work through her own publishing house, Lizard Queen Press. She also publishes rock and roll murder novels with the character Rennie Stride, a rock reporter detective, and her boyfriend Turk Wayland, a superstar English lead guitarist. The series blends real bands and locations with fictional characters. Some of the titles include Love Him Madly, Murder at the Whiskey, Go Ask Malice, Murder at Woodstock, and Scareway to Heaven, Murder at the Fillmore East. I would have been happy to share a link for Lizard Queen Press, but there does not seem to be a website for it. Kenneally Morrison is on Facebook, and she has posted a list of rules for those who wish to communicate with her. You're not allowed to say the word shit, but you are allowed to say the word fuck. You are not allowed to talk about Jim Morrison, and you are not allowed to use internet abbreviations such as LOL. OMG and emoticons are allowed because they amuse her. Did we miss a fact check for this episode? Did we get something wrong? Or do you want to just let us know how we're doing? Send us a message through the website biopicsmostlysuck.com and let us know. And there you have it, The Doors by Oliver Stone, a pretentious film that presents one side of Jim Morrison and little of anyone else. It gets a solid 4 stars as a piece of entertainment, but for the facts, we graded it a D. On the Biopics Mostly Suck Truth Meter, that means it is inspired by something somewhere, and there is a germ of truth in this movie. I want to thank John Helix for sharing his knowledge of The Doors, both the band and the movie. John is a local singer-songwriter in the San Diego area, and you can find his music almost anywhere you go to get your downloaded music. Or, you know what, just go to johnhelixofficial.com and give his website some hits. While we're sending out the thank yous and the appreciative vibes, I want to thank you for taking part of your day to listen to our little old podcast here. Be sure to give us some love and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. Visit us at biopicsmostlysuck.com, where you can find the podcast platforms where you can find us. And you can also drop us a line and let us know how we're doing, or just recommend a movie where we can find the facts. Today I'm going to send you out with some music from John Helix. Please enjoy his song that goes with today's movie, Hey Lizard King, from his album Tune Out, Turn Off, Disconnect. Take care, everyone.
I'm standing on a cliff overlooking this Aegean, an Eoston night turned into this, and I'm seeing what might be my last fight, and I'm thinking of jumping, 'cause on these sands I can connect nothing with nothing. I'm standing at the top of Montparnasse Tower, and I'm thinking at last this could be the hour. The city darkens, all its lights delivers me to